sometimes some mind-blowing. Stories can start with just a harmless bolt of light that appears out of nowhere. Our main character, named Jeff, finds himself in the place where lightning struck the ground. Jeff suddenly opens his eyes and decides to look around to find out where he ended up. He realizes that he somehow miraculously survived the lightning strike, but it brought him back to Earth. After checking his reserves of internal strength, he realizes that there is not a single trace left of them, as if he started all over again. However, he decides not to be discouraged, gets up and says that his new life is finally beginning. A few moments later, he notices a strange movement in the bushes and decides to turn around to check who it is. After taking a closer look, he realizes that there is a girl here who came here to relieve herself. A little Jeff ponders for a while about what to do in the situation, but decides to come out of the shadows. Rising to his feet and closing his eyes, he says that there are much more suitable places for this. A girl named Asura turns around irritably at the main character and realizes that he has been spying on her all this time. Jeff looks at her closely and realizes that he knows this person very well from his past life. The star quickly dresses and calls Jeff a dirty bastard, after which she runs away. Jeff thinks and realizes that he has not just returned to Earth, but has found himself far in the past. Looking closely at his hands, he realizes that he has gone back in time and is now undergoing an internship. Asura also plays an important role in this story, as she is currently his leader. He also realizes that his past image has nothing to do with his present, and the heavenly strike has indeed taken away his powers. This confronts him with the fact that now he will have to somehow survive without abilities, relying only on his wits. A few moments later, his phone starts ringing, and he wonders who it could be. Taking a closer look at the phone, he realizes that the deputy director is calling him. Jeff asks the vice principal what he wanted to discuss, but his interlocutor is clearly hostile. He immediately starts shouting loudly that they have a new director and that he must immediately go to the luxurious Triumph restaurant. Jeff sets off to his destination because this spiritual guidance is meant to help him along the way. Walking carefully through the restaurant, he opens the doors and sees the man who called him, as well as Asura, the director, says that he has the honor of introducing him to a new manager, who turns out to be this girl. The deputy director says that Asura is a doctor of science who came from a USA, approaching him almost in a whisper. He tells him that he is on probation and therefore must show his best side. The vice principal also introduces Jeff to Asura, saying that he has been teaching English at the high school for a month now. Asura carefully repeats Jeff's name and asks him if she made a mistake, showing with all her appearance that she is irritated. Jeff greets her politely, saying that he is glad to welcome her to his team. He also reflects on how he has become much more cold-blooded over the past 1,000 years, and quickly figures out that Asura is upset with him. He extends his hand to her to greet her, but she abruptly turns away from him and leaves. The girl argues that this idiot should be expelled from school, but she does not have the authority to do this yet. Jeff is secretly glad that this girl left, because she has a terrible character, and she's also his sister's friend. Jeff recalls that Asura is the only daughter of the chairman of the city district's board of directors. He remembers that in his past life, he had a good relationship with his sister, but now Asura is his sister's best friend. His thoughts are interrupted by the voice of a young girl who says that she has saved a seat for him. Jeff recognizes her as Tiffany, who was his girlfriend in a past life, but their relationship ended. Jeff shakes his head to the side and says that so many years have passed, and therefore it is not worth remembering it anymore. Moving a chair closer to Tiffany, he says that they haven't seen each other for a long time. Tiffany looks at him in surprise and asks him what he means by long ago. An older woman approaches the pair of heroes and says that there is an official banquet today, and she does not understand why Jeff was allowed in. Looking like that, Tiffany looks at the girl who approached him in surprise, trying to understand what her intentions were. The girl cautiously approaches her and says that Tiffany is young and beautiful, and this man is not a match for her. Tiffany asks her senior colleague not to say such inappropriate things. Jeff grins and says that he is actually interested in another girl. He turns around and realizes that his heart is now taken. While words are heard behind him about how unlucky his beloved is, Tiffany asks her co-worker Margaret to just stop making noise. Jeff reflects that his powers are now somewhere on the level of a warrior follower. We also understand that in this life, He himself is able to develop his abilities through willpower. Meanwhile, one of the teachers says that he would like to introduce them to a new employee. This employee is a young man named Stanley, whose family owns the restaurant. Stanley greets his dear colleagues, after which he introduces himself by name. Margaret looks at him and realizes that this man is a true role model. She also recommends that Tiffany pay attention to this person, since he is in general promising. Jeff looks at Stanley and reflects on how they haven't seen each other in a long time. He also understands that this man has caused him a lot of trouble and has set him up in every possible way. All of this was done solely to get Tiffany's attention, which is why Jeff eventually quit. Stanley approaches Jeff and hands him his business card, saying that as an old friend, he is offering him a 20% discount. Jeff reflects on how this is an extremely dismissive attitude from his interlocutor, who is clearly bragging about his real estate. Jeff says he's heard rumors that another member of the Stanley family will soon be taken over as the restaurant's manager. Stanley replies that Jeff is certainly aware of what's going on in social circles, but a snake will always remain a snake. His senior colleague asks how he can behave like this, since he still has a long way to go to learn. To get close to Stanley's level, he also recommends that you distance yourself from it, stating that this place does not belong to him at all. Jeff asks his interlocutor why on earth he is trying to kick him out of this place. The arrogant colleague replies that the reason is that Jeff is just an ordinary intern. Margaret notes that the group leader is seriously angry, and apparently Jeff is really in big trouble. Jeff stands up and says that no one present can even afford to sit in this chair. After that, he smiles, waiting to see how Stanley will react to this rather obvious provocation. Stanley angrily calls the protagonist a clown and tells him to just stop talking. After this, he sits down on the table and declares that one should never stand on ceremony with such people. Margaret says with a smirk that Jeff will always be a poor, spineless loser. However, it turns out that there's a slight catch here, because the leg of the chair was seriously weakened. A few seconds later, there is a loud crack and Stanley falls down at high speed. During the fall, he also dropped his glass of wine, spilling it all over himself and making a rather unsightly appearance. He immediately calls the waiter over and asks her what such a defective chair is doing in this restaurant. Jeff states that Stanley is very self-critical, since he managed to break his own family's property. Stanley looks angrily at the protagonist and understands that he still has to deal with him. Jeff smiles and remembers how, using his inner strength, he had quietly damaged 2 legs of a chair. Turning towards the exit, he is about to leave, but Stanley immediately stops him. After a while, all the teachers sit down at the table and decide to have a little dinner while discussing pressing issues. Some of the teachers suggest going to a special bar, and Stanley happily announces that he will treat everyone. Margaret says with admiration that this is the most expensive bar in the city, where at least $10,000 are spent per person. To put it bluntly, this place would be very expensive, and he would really have to fork out some cash. Stanley replies that it's a mere trifle, and he is ready to treat absolutely everyone. In honor of their first meeting, the group leader says that they are all truly lucky to have such a generous and noble colleague as Stanley. Jeff reflects that anyone can become a teacher if they want to, but Stanley really has an excellent education. He also understands that one day some student will piss him off, and the next day a crowd of hooligans will simply beat him up. Jeff calmly follows the rest of the teachers, fully aware of how events will develop in the near future. Tiffany pauses for a moment and then turns to Jeff to have a little private conversation with him. She asks him not to be angry and says that he should apologize to Stanley, because this man is very dangerous. Jeff looks at her in surprise and asks why he should apologize for his words. Jeff claims that he is the Lord of Hell and a true deity, who, even if he makes mistakes, does not feel guilty about it. He also says that people with such different outlooks on life simply cannot work together. Even if they wanted to, he leaves immediately after, thinking that he and Tiffany will probably never be able to understand each other. After a while, the action moves to a parking lot with luxury cars. Walking a little further, you can see a club room where many people are having a good time. Jeff is thinking about the fact that classes are starting tomorrow, and he hasn't even started doing his homework, which is too bad. Meanwhile, Margaret decides to talk to Stanley and mentions that she heard that the bar actually belongs to a certain Hank. Stanley reflects that Hank does, indeed have a lot of power and is well entrenched in this city. He also thinks that his family's hotels and restaurant are inferior in status to this man's establishments. Looking around, he realizes that having arrived from the village, he was never able to re-establish his former connections. After a while, the door to the room suddenly swings open, and several mercenaries enter. They state that their target is the fat man who should be here, after which all eyes turn to the group's leader. The mercenaries carefully examine the man and quickly approach him to prevent him from escaping. The group leader asks them what they are doing there and threatens to call the police and tell everything. The mercenaries respond that such measures will be useless because now the owner himself will come here. The leader of the group tries to get out and calls everyone else for help, but no one is in a hurry to help him. Stanley goes out onto the dance floor and asks the mercenaries what's going on. One of the mercenaries tells Stanley that this man was pestering the owner's girlfriend, so it's better for him not to interfere. The group leader says he had no idea the girl was already taken. Stanley has a friendly conversation with the mercenary and says that he can be understood. He just made a mistake. But then he immediately assumes a threatening pose and warns that, if necessary, he will use his fists immediately. After this, the mercenaries grab the group's leader and drag him away to deal with him in their own way. Stanley tries to console his comrade, saying that they will not leave him, and at the same time, they will test how resilient this guy is. The enraged bandit says that things won't go this way, and now they all have to go with him. The other teachers move on excitedly. But Jeff calmly follows Stanley and the mercenaries, returning to one of the teachers, who is pregnant. He tells her that they must stick together and try not to panic. The girl also smiles and thanks him for his generosity, which cannot go unappreciated. Margaret angrily says that when those bandits broke in, Jeff kept quiet and now he's playing the hero. After some time, they reach the main room where the head of this establishment sits. The girl turns to Hank and says that this fat man touched her in indecent places. Stanley realizes that if they are directly confronted with Hank, then the situation is very bad indeed. Hank, with a satisfied grin, declares that he is the owner of this place and asks them if they can't live in peace. Stanley comes closer and tries to politely communicate with this man. To explain everything, Hank makes it clear that he does not intend to resolve this issue with simple dialogue and immediately smashes the table with bottles. Stanley watches this closely and realizes that this man's influence extends even to the main city of the province. Jeff muses that this man was able to take advantage of Stanley's father's resignation by taking over several districts. An angry girl approaches the group leader, calls him fat, and slaps him. The team leader falls to his knees before Hank and begs his forgiveness, saying that he was indeed wrong. Hank smiles and says that he will let them go, only on the condition that Stanley breaks the group leader's arms. Stanley looks at his interlocutor in surprise, trying to understand what all this means. Margaret tries to intervene in what has happened, saying that they have no right to treat teachers like this because the media will find out about it. Hank looks at his potential victims with a smile and says that there is nothing about them that gives away their identity. As teachers, he also adds that he has had female students, nurses, and flight attendants, but no teachers yet. Immediately after a few moments, he begins to demonstrate a clear desire to defile one of the girls, pointing his finger at Margaret and Tiffany. He declares that he will only let the fat man go if these two beauties spend the night with him. Margaret says that their actions are illegal and unlawful. Hank just smirks and turns to his subordinate named Alan, ordering him to bring the girls here. Alan replies that his order will be carried out immediately and begins to flex his fists. Margaret realizes that the worst possible outcome has come for them, since Stanley does not dare interfere. Jeff calmly steps forward and addresses Hank, saying that he wants to challenge him to a fight. Hank looks at him in surprise and asks who the hell he is. Tiffany presses herself closer to him, surprised at his incredible determination. Jeff says that they did indeed do something wrong, but no one has the right to treat teachers like that. Alan rushes forward and asks Jeff if he knows who their boss is. Jeff lands a quick, swift punch right across Alan's face to quiet the bastard, despite the fact that this blow was very fast. It turns out to be so powerful that Alan is thrown back several meters. He also destroys several tables with his body, causing him additional damage. Jeff says that Alan insulted not just a person, but a real teacher, which is absolutely unacceptable. He repeats once again that you can't humiliate a teacher, even if you're the biggest scumbag. Alan clutches his throat with difficulty, feeling that it is becoming increasingly difficult for him to breathe. Hank smirks and says that Jeff has no idea how many people he's already managed to humiliate. He also adds that the place is called the Dragon's Den, but Jeff calls it dump. Stanley realizes that the situation is escalating incredibly quickly, since no one can stand such an insult. He tries to smooth things over and asks Hank to listen to the man, saying that they are just ordinary people. He also says that they work at middle school number 3, and Hank understands that the principal of this school is a highly respected man taking a drag on his cigar. He says that everyone else can go, but Jeff must stay smiling. He adds that he shouldn't be afraid, since the most he could get is a broken arm or leg. Tiffany protests and says that they will not leave without him under any circumstances. Jeff reassures her that she has to take her pregnant teacher home. After that, he smiles and says that he will deal with these people on his own and without any particular problems. Stanley and the other teachers gradually begin to evacuate, hoping that they will actually be released. Tiffany says that Jeff should detain all the bad guys while they call the police. Jeff stands up, watches them go, and is relieved to see that there are no civilians left here. Now at that very moment, he is surrounded on all sides by bandits, ready to beat him with maximum cruelty. Hank smiles and asks him what he plans to fight back with. One of the fighters says that his name is Zai, and he has a signature move called the Black Fist. Jeff smiles and says, "He looks like the loser you used to tell bedtime stories to." Ike immediately gets angry and rushes forward to deliver a powerful attack. Jeff immediately delivers a powerful counterpunch, using his energy to knock his opponent aside. The blow is so powerful that Ike begins to bleed internally. Hank says that this is the first time he has met a man who managed to disgrace him, right on his own property. Immediately after this, he adds that if rumors spread about this, he will again find himself in poverty. Meanwhile, the bandits arm themselves with real, deadly bladed weapons and attack Jeff. Jeff turns around and says that it was a very reckless decision. Within moments, he launches a rapid series of strikes, jumping from one opponent to another. It doesn't take long before Jeff realizes that he only wounded these people, but didn't kill them. Hank, along with his new girlfriend, watches what is happening in amazement, realizing that all of this is simply incredible. Hank remembers that this man reminds him of an old man who had similar skills. The bandits wonder if it is the same person. Coming closer to Jeff, Hank asks who he really is and what personality he hides behind his appearance. Instead of answering, Jeff walks up to one of the columns and puts his hand on. Hank watches what is happening closely and suddenly freezes in horror, realizing that something unclean is happening here. The thing is after Jeff's touch. A massive imprint remained on the concrete column. The other bandits begin to question whether Jeff is even a living person, or maybe an actual god. Alan asks Hank what's going on and what their next plan is now. Hank, in irritation, hits his assistant and demands to know if he really wants him dead. Immediately after this, he turns to his right hand and orders him to come to Jeff and talk to him. Smiling, Hank says that if this person is really who he thinks he is, then everything is working out just fine. Meanwhile, the teachers finally go outside and try to figure out what to do next. Margaret tells Tiffany not to worry, assuring her that the police will arrive any minute. Suddenly, Jeff comes out of the building and asks them why they are still here. Tiffany happily runs up to him and asks if everything is really okay. Jeff replies that they talked to him, and his words set the enemy on the path of truth. Tiffany is impressed by this obvious bluff and says he has proven himself worthy. Jeff muses that all's well that ends well, since it's better for them not to know what happened. The next day comes and the sunrise rises over the city. Jeff continues to meditate, improving his skills, and reflects on the fact that he needs to find a new place of power. He also understands that the more greenery there is around, the higher his aura, which means that school is the ideal place. Getting up on one knee and looking out the window, he realizes he must get there as quickly as possible. When he gets to school, he discovers to his regret that it is closed, and he urgently needs to find a source of spiritual energy. To find it, he decides to use the divine search skill. This skill works like a sonar, instantly highlighting the desired points. Jeff finds himself in a small park and realizes that he must connect with the forces of nature. When he reaches the 1,000-year-old tree, he feels a huge energy pulsating inside him. He takes a few steps back to prepare for the ritual, concentrating on his inner energy. he takes action, he stretches his arms forward, and they begin to perform strange movements. His knowledge of ancient teachings helps him to choose the right tactics. Without fail, the energy begins to resonate with his actions, and he feels it is time to end. Within moments, he manages to create a powerful gust of wind that tears leaves from the trees. This impulse turns out to be so strong that one of the random witnesses is left in shock from what he saw. Jeff realizes that he has finally released his inner energy and achieved mastery in martial arts. Looking at himself, he realizes that he really is a warrior of ancient novels, but he needs artifacts, referring to his past identity as the Lord of Hell. He promises to make sure he pays everyone back. After some time, he notices a strange man behind him who bows to him. Jeff asks him what he is doing here, but the man responds by asking how he was able to achieve such a level. The man introduces himself as Howard and asks to be taken as an apprentice in order to learn at least a small part of this skill. Jeff realizes that it is none other than Howard standing in front of him, and says that others would have spat in his face long ago. Howard angrily declares that he will severely punish anyone who dares to do this. He also says that he has dreamed of mastering this technique all his life, but it is difficult to master. Despite all his efforts, Jeff reflects on the fact that the director really wants to become his student, but he cannot reveal to him the secret of the teaching. He also realizes that this art is extremely difficult to understand and is completely beyond the capabilities of ordinary students. Jeff is also a little embarrassed that the director is not the most talented person, and most likely he will not succeed. Howard speculates that there is another dimension, deep within the world, where all people have superpowers. After this, he loudly begs the protagonist to help him achieve his dream. Jeff decides to somehow get out of the situation and directs a beam of energy at the student. Howard stares at Jeff in amazement and feels power fill his body. Jeff says that's fine. He'll be his mentor, but only after Howard proves his ability. Howard falls to his knees and says with trepidation that he is immensely grateful to his new master. Jeff realizes that the director is too old to fully grasp the art and that he will probably need special elixirs. Meanwhile, Howard reflects on the fact that his master has most likely already mastered absolutely every technique that exists. Rising to his feet, he asks what his name is. Jeff gives his name, but immediately asks not to call him master in public, to avoid unnecessary attention. Howard, slightly embarrassed, replies that the ancient rules state that a student must respect and appreciate his mentor. Jeff chuckles and says that Howard can address him like that, in private, but not in front of others. He also adds that he is a follower of the pack, teaching which can only be achieved through total dedication, and he admits that older people, as a rule, simply do not have enough vitality to master it to the end. But at the same time, he decides to reveal one secret. Howard looks at the master with bated breath and asks what this secret is. Jeff comes closer, puts his finger to Howard's forehead, and says, "The secret is here for a moment." Howard falls into a transcendental state, instantly absorbing a whole layer of knowledge. When he comes to, he is shocked that Jeff was able to transfer spiritual energy to him directly. It's incredible. However, Jeff says that it's time for them to finish the first session. He needs to go. Howard stands there lost in thought, realizing that he still has a million questions, and his mentor is an extraordinary person. He rushes after him and invites the master to his home for dinner, saying that he lives nearby. Jeff stops abruptly, turns around, and replies that he would not mind accepting the offer. After some time, they find themselves in Howard's house, where he mentions that he lives there with his wife. He adds with a smile that his children have not been able to come to visit for years. They are too busy. Jeff realizes that this man is clearly not poor because his daughter is the chairman of a 5-star hotel. Coming closer, the director knocks on the door to attract his wife's attention. A few seconds later, the door opens, and the woman notices with surprise that he has brought a student to them. Howard clears his throat and proudly declares that this man is not a student at all, but his mentor. The older woman looks at Jeff in confusion and asks again if he really is her husband's mentor. Howard adds that his wife sometimes behaves in a manner that is out of proportion to her age and position. Jeff, realizing who is in front of him, mentions that this woman is a famous doctor, and the director simply volunteered to accompany him for practice and asked to take him as an apprentice. The director's wife apologizes for the misunderstanding and says that she simply didn't know who he was. At the same time, she admits that her husband has long been obsessed with this teaching and is becoming more and more stubborn with age. She invites Jeff into the house and tells him to make himself at home while she gets dinner ready. At this moment, Jeff looks closely at the elderly woman and suddenly notices something strange. He points to her ankle and says, "It's hurt." The woman asks in amazement how he knew this, since the injury doesn't give away anything visually. The director is also stunned and asks his wife why she didn't say anything earlier. A woman named Mary says it is an old injury that she believes can no longer be treated. Jeff says it's much more serious, and if she doesn't get treatment now, she won't be able to walk in 2 years. Mary is stunned that it took Jeff one look to recognize the problem. Howard begins to question his wife about why she hid all this, to which she replies that he is always yelling and does not let her say a word. Mary abruptly ends the argument, saying that now is not the time because she needs to go cook. Howard approaches Jeff and asks if he knows how to heal such an injury. Mary, who has already visited, does. Thousands of doctors brushes it off, considering it all nonsense. But Jeff remembers that this woman was a former military doctor who showed incredible bravery. He confidently says that the doctors were wrong, but Mary replies that he believes in official medicine, and Howard, meanwhile, continues to make noise, realizing that she has no choice. She decides to show him her injury. Jeff gets down on one knee, examines the leg, and says it's a mere trifle for a master like him. After a few seconds, he concentrates the energy into 2 fingers and touches the injured ankle. Mary watches in shock and asks how such an injury can be healed with just one touch. She also calls him teacher for the first time and asks what this technique is. Jeff smiles and says that it is a secret technique, but massage is necessary. He turns to Howard and tells him to remember everything he says now. He explains that it is necessary to massage the damaged area daily for a month, and then everything will completely go away. Howard looks at his wife with awe and says that their guest is truly a great man, whose greatness cannot be estimated. Mary thanks Jeff and admits that he is truly talented and just has no place in a regular high school. Howard responds by asking his wife not to undermine the master's authority in front of other teachers. Jeff smiles, realizing that in front of him is a sweet married couple who have lived together for many years. A little time passes, and they finish their dinner in conversation. Howard falls to his knees again and asks Jeff for permission to buy him some tea. Suddenly, the door of the room opens, and a little girl enters, surprised to see her grandfather kneeling. Taking a closer look, she recognizes the guest as an intern from her school. Howard looks at Jeff in confusion, realizing that he is the intern that is the stuff of legends. Jeff reflects on how his students call him Quiet Jeff because he never yells. Howard's granddaughter tries to reason with her grandfather, saying that he is an ordinary teacher and not some kind of master. The grandfather also yells at his granddaughter, telling her that she should shut up and apologize to teacher Jeff. The granddaughter looks at the main character with irritation and asks him why he is picking on her grandfather. Jeff smiles and reminds this girl, named Faye, that he assigned her 10 books for the holidays. Faye reflects that she doesn't care about these stupid books and would like to deal with this scoundrel. Immediately after this, she, angry, says that she needs to meet her father. Jeff says with a satisfied look that it would be better for her to stay home so that nothing unpleasant happens. Faye understands that this scoundrel is now on top, but no one will believe him. The next moment, she slips and falls face down on the ground, while Jeff tells her that he warned her. Howard looks at what is happening with disbelief and cannot believe that his mentor can also see the future. After some time, the scene moves to secondary school number 3, where our hero teaches walking along these corridors. He realizes that he has not been here for about 100 years and has forgotten almost everything. Entering one of the offices, he understands that a surprise awaits him at the entrance, but now he cannot be surprised by this. As soon as he opens the door, a glass of water screwed into a special place falls on his head. Luckily, Jeff has lived through this situation several times before, so it doesn't take him by surprise. With incredible speed and precision, he intercepts the glass right in midair. Smiling, he says that he would never have thought that the glass missed him so much. The students immediately begin to mock him and say that soon the teacher will finally lose this day. Jeff takes a few steps forward and discovers that the floor is soapy. A small smile appears on his face, as he realizes that this is a rather old trick that no longer works. Faye and the other classmates watch the teacher closely, hoping that he will slip having crossed the dangerous areas. He says that his students did a great job and washed the floor until it shined. Faye looks angrily at his hated teacher and says that he won this time. But it's not over yet. A cocky class leader named Lenny says that their entire class thinks Jeff should quit. Jeff wonders in his mind why he tolerated the bullying of these kids in the past, but it doesn't bother him now. After some time, what was happening was interrupted by a soft knock on the wooden door. Jeff looks away and finds the group leader talking about him having to switch classes with Stanley. The students watching this immediately fall silent and realize that they may be in an awkward situation. Jeff says he never thought something like this would be acceptable and asks if the principal knows about it. The team leader says that Jeff is just an intern, and they don't like to bother the director with trifles. Stanley also says that they would like to ask Jeff to be disciplined. Smiling, he says that apparently a huge number of students will only be glad to see him go. The students begin to whisper among themselves and come to the conclusion that Jeff is probably better than Stanley. After all, Stanley, meanwhile, begins to lose his temper and says that he is not just talking to Jeff for no reason. Jeff chuckles and says that he doesn't talk to people whose essence resembles a pile of manure. Stanley immediately loses his temper and asks the protagonist how he dared to insult him. Jeff smiles and says that this man's hearing is actually quite good. The students also start laughing and say that Jeff is a rather strange teacher. The team leader advises Jeff to watch his language and remember where he is. The headman says that there is no reason for swearing and that friendly competition can be arranged. He also says that he will ask just one question, and whoever answers it correctly will definitely win. Stanley agrees because if the students want it, they can't refuse. Thinking that he definitely can't lose to a university loser, he grabs 2 pieces of chalk. After this, he approaches the glass of water and says that the loser will have to drink it and drops the crayons into it. Jeff calmly takes the glass and says that this is too small a bet. He declares that if you play, you need to play for real and spits into this glass. Stanley watches this procedure with horror and realizes that it seems incredibly disgusting to him. However, it makes a favorable impression on the children, who have been watching what is happening all this time. Stanley smiles and says that in that case, Jeff will drink his own water. Jeff does not respond to this provocation and turns to the headman, demanding to ask him this question. The headman says that everyone must write the first 1,000 characters of the first section of the Daedeging from memory on a separate board. The students start laughing and saying that this is a very difficult task, and no one knows it by heart. Faye also puts her hand to her head and realizes that this is a complete disgrace that cannot be avoided. Stanley demonstrates his extraordinary knowledge of literature and says that he knows this work by heart. Jeff reflects on how the students of his secret art know every word in this description by heart. Stanley takes a piece of chalk and without any problems begins to draw whatever his memory tells him. He turns around happily and reflects on the fact that he has already secured an incredible victory for himself. Faye, meanwhile, tries to support Stanley so that he can win and humiliate the teacher she hates. Jeff continues to write down hieroglyphs with incredible ease, thinking that if you win, then only beautifully. From the outside, it may seem that he writes complete nonsense, but there are some peculiarities to this. Lenny squints and points out that quiet. Jeff wrote the first character incorrectly. After some time, one of the students says that Jeff actually writes the text. From the end, other students say they can't believe their teacher is so cool and capable. The whole point is that this description is a treatise that God has commissioned his followers to distribute. He also thinks about how he will soon meet his mentor brothers, the master and another girl. Some time passes and he completes his task. He speaks with incredible pride about the fact that the Holy Scripture was written from beginning to end, impressed by what is happening. The students stand up and sincerely applaud the main character. Faye watches Jeff in surprise and thinks that something is wrong with this man, as if he had been replaced. Stanley also observes his opponent and realizes that he is much more capable than he initially thought. Jeff places one chalk forward and looks at his opponent carefully, preparing to destroy his reputation. With incredible calm, he says that he won, which means Stanley ended up in the loser's camp. Stanley smiles and says that this couldn't have happened because they both wrote the text by heart. Lenny smiles and says that Jeff wrote the hieroglyphs from the end, which means the conditions were not equal. Stanley wonders if it is really possible to write these hieroglyphs backwards. Lenny turns to the teacher arrogantly and asks him if he can't see what is written on the next board. Stanley comes closer and notices with horror that indeed all these hieroglyphs were written from the end. His head immediately begins to feel heavy, and his own ego is incredibly destroyed into pieces. Stanley loses his temper and says that he simply cannot believe it and demands that Jeff repeat it. The cheeky class monitor wonders if this man still wants to be their class teacher. Jeff hands him that very glass and tells him that he just needs to admit his defeat. The students chat among themselves and happily remark that Jeff is more interesting than they thought. Stanley says that all this is pure idiocy and stupidity. Jeff says that this is the price of defeat and recommends that he drink holy water. The other students realize that this all sounds incredibly disgusting, but decide to watch what is happening. Stanley loses his temper again and says that Jeff used a cheat sheet and the other students conspired. The group leader says that he will not allow this and that they have already joked, which means there is no point in going that far. Jeff turns to his senior colleague and asks him if he would like to drink it for him. However, the class takes the side of the protagonist and asks Stanley where his honor is. Stanley succumbs to this provocation and immediately snatches the ill-fated glass from Jeff's hands. Immediately after this, he drinks the disgusting liquid that is inside in one gulp. After this, he wipes his mouth and thinks that he will definitely take revenge on this scoundrel. Immediately after this, he runs out into the corridor, dropping the glass on the floor and making characteristic sounds. The team leader tries to follow his colleague and stop him in order to at least somehow resolve the situation. Some students praise the main character, while others begin to feel sick from such disgusting things. However, the overall reaction of the class is positive, and they are happy that their teacher behaved the way he did. After a while, a loud bell rings, signaling that the lesson is coming to an end. Jeff walks out of the classroom doors, wondering what he should do with his life now. However, after a while, his thoughts are interrupted by another teacher, who comes closer to him. She addresses him respectfully and says that the director was looking for him. Jeff wonders if this is Director Astarte. The scene moves to the office of Director Astarte, who has been waiting for Jeff to arrive all this time. She asks Jeff why he behaved so disgustingly, hinting that he might get fired for it. Jeff smiles and says that she probably means when they first met. Astarte begins to get angry at such senseless mockery and prepares to yell at him. Jeff says he didn't tell anyone anything, but apparently people found out anyway. Astarte decides not to continue this pointless dialogue and sits down in a chair to wait. A little later, she talks about how Jeff embarrassed the teacher in front of the class and that it was pretty bad. Jeff pauses dramatically for a moment before setting his mug down on the table with a distinctive clink. Astarte makes the false assumption that this man has most likely come to his senses and understood what he is telling her. Jeff talks about how suppressing emotions leads to endocrine system disorders and acne on the butt. Astarte tries to understand what all this was about, but after a while, she begins to be torn apart by anger. She throws a magazine with notes at him and tells him to get the hell out of the office. Jeff, with a lazy expression on his face, reaches out and catches the magazine in midair without any trouble. Astarte says that the main character is a real bastard who behaves disgustingly. Jeff says he just doesn't want to pander to that rich guy who gets away with too much. Astarte says that Stanley has a very bad relationship with his family, and this incident will not be left alone. She adds that whether he stays here or not depends solely on the decision of the group leader. She also states that the first performance appraisal indicator is 30%, dependent on the manager's assessment. In addition, she says that the second indicator of certification depends on her personal assessment by 20%. After that, she announces that the remaining 50% is the final class rate. Jeff is genuinely surprised that the conditions have suddenly changed, because previously it was enough for the class to be in the top 10. While communicating with his interlocutor, he understands that she is doing this on purpose, to make his life difficult. Astarte calmly says that if he gets the required number of points, she will stop interfering in his showdowns. Jeff happily rises from his chair and says that he is glad to make such a deal. After some time, he goes home, and a dark night falls over the city. Jeff remembers that he has never called his family before and wonders what he will say. As he dials the number, he realizes that he really does miss them. The action moves to an unknown apartment, where the protagonist's relatives live. A vibrating phone is noticed by a little girl, reading a book while in a wheelchair. Looking closely at the caller ID, she sees that it is her dear brother calling her. The young girl immediately asks where he has been, adding that her father still can't stop talking about it. Hearing her voice, Jeff feels his lips begin to tremble, but he suppresses it with an effort of will. Without hiding the tears in his eyes, he thinks about how much he missed this girl, whom he had not seen for 1,000 years. Jeff explains that he has started work, so he will be busy, and then asks how her legs are. The point is that his sister has congenital atrophy of the lower leg, and doctors have never found a cure. His sister smirks, calls him an old man, and says that she's long been used to it. Immediately after this, she begins to turn the pages of her book, carefully studying its contents. She then asks if he can come over on the weekend, to which he confidently replies that it can be arranged. After listening to her brother's story, the sister jokes that one day he will find himself a bride with a great figure. Jeff smirks, says that his sister is always making fun of it, and advises her to go to bed immediately. After this, he thinks that he can now help his sister. But to do this, he needs to increase the level of spiritual energy. Staring into the mirror, he reflects that among other things, he will definitely find their mother, and they will finally live as a family again. The action moves to the protagonist's house the next day. When the dawn sun rises over the city, Jeff sits down in a special meditation pose and feels spiritual energy begin to flow through him. His deep meditation process is interrupted by loud knocks on the door. Before Jeff can even put his coat on, his roommate bursts into the room. He says that you can't sit at home all day and invites him to go to a club to hang out. He also states that his friends will be there, and he can introduce Jeff to them. After some time, the action moves to this very club where only rich people hang out. Even if you ask a random club goer how much his clothes cost, the answer will be a lot of zeros. Jeff's friend introduces him to other people at the club, saying that he works as a teacher. The rich kid named Larry just chuckled in irritation, realizing that he was dealing with an ordinary poor man. Jeff understands perfectly well that these people are the golden youth, and they do not take his friends seriously. Yet the girl standing next to this rich kid declares that her dog dresses better than Jeff. Jeff's friend tries to smooth things over and turn everything into a joke, but it doesn't work. The girl sarcastically adds that the poor should know their place, and that they wouldn't talk to him at all if it weren't for his brother. Jeff's friend apologizes to this snooty girl named Citron and says he should be richer. The protagonist realizes that he has been drawn into a verbal duel and decides to take a glass of wine. Jeff turns to the girl and says that he heard that people who mock other people's wealth are actually freaks. Citron immediately loses her temper and asks her friend Jeff, who he brought here, Larry, with a displeased expression on his face, states that such behavior is unacceptable and the man should apologize. Jeff's friend says he'll sort everything out, hinting that his comrade is still a newbie and doesn't know how things work here. After this, he turns to Jeff and asks him to apologize immediately. Meanwhile, Jeff decides to look around and notices his student named Venus. Several men approach her and say that she should sit with them. Then she will receive a nice envelope. Venus tries to avoid an unpleasant situation and says that she urgently needs to go on business. One of the club's patrons replies that they will negotiate with her boss to give her a day off. One of the men asks the girl to come closer and show how she can dance. The other men are happy and say that it looks like something very interesting is going to happen. Venus apologizes to these people, showing miracles of politeness, and says that she is really very busy. After a while, several men appear behind her and begin to push her closer to the table. Venus finally loses her temper and asks them to stop immediately, adding that otherwise she will call security. One of the villains tries to grab the girl and threateningly states that if she doesn't want it the good way, then everything will be the bad way. Jeff stands up for the unfortunate girl and calls the visitor a pig who allows himself too much. The angry fat cat, who has already had a fair amount to drink, is preparing to attack the main character. He waves his hand, saying that this man was wrong to think of himself as a hero, and now he will pay for it. Jeff stops this ridiculous drunken attack by using a stream of wine, aiming it straight at his opponent's face. The insulted villain says that he will finish Jeff off for what he just did at that very moment. He is surrounded by other people, who clearly have some connection to the mafia circle. The thug in the white shirt and jacket says that Jeff shouldn't be surprised why his arms are broken. Jeff asks these scoundrels what they are doing, realizing that he must protect the student. The bandit asks the protagonist if he knows who their boss is, hinting that it is Hank himself. Venus understands that if we are talking about this person, then things have gone too far. She tries to fix the situation and says that she can handle this situation herself, and he should leave. Jeff replies that she should stand aside somewhere and come up with a rational explanation for everything. Venus starts to cry, not expecting her teacher to suddenly yell at her. Meanwhile, Jeff's friend watches what is happening in surprise and tries to understand what his roommate is doing. He falls to his knees in front of Larry and says that his friend simply hasn't left the house for a long time and has completely forgotten himself. Larry smiles and says that there is nothing he can do, since he has run into a big bore in the person of Hank. Citron begins to laugh heartily and says that apparently the real show is about to begin. This behavior angers a fairly honest person, and he decides to intervene in what is happening. Immediately after this, he turns towards the villains who surrounded his comrade, trying to defuse the conflict. He apologizes to the fat cat, stating that his friend simply hasn't left the house for a long time. But in response, the fat cat swings at the man who addresses him politely to shut up. Jeff's friend hopes that this blow will end everything, and that he will thus atone for his guilt. To everyone's surprise, the slap never achieves its goal due to outside interference. Jeff talks about how naughty hands are always getting into places they don't belong to fat cat. And Glasses asks the main character what the hell he is doing, not understanding what kind of trap he has fallen into. Jeff, meanwhile, grabs his opponent's fingers and begins to bend them at unnatural angles. The villains begin to scream loudly, experiencing incredible attacks of pain from what has happened. However, this is not enough. The very next second, another one of his fingers is completely broken. Jeff continues to torture his opponent, not shying away from the most sophisticated methods of inflicting injuries. The golden youth, who had been silently watching this all this time, suddenly stood up feeling fear. One of the bandits says that Jeff has 3 seconds to let him go. Otherwise, he will sign his own death warrant. Impressed by such menacing appearance, other members of the club say that this bandit looks very courageous. Jeff's friend tries to calm him down, telling him to just let him go and go home. Jeff stops his friend and asks him not to interfere, adding that he will deal with everything himself. Immediately after this, he looks at his victim and says that he will definitely answer for what he did. Not even a few moments pass before he, with a light movement of his hand, separates several phalanges from the base of the finger. The villain starts screaming and says that he actually didn't do anything wrong. Jeff turns to the bald bandit and says that his friend is kind of weak and he should apologize. The bandit looks closely at his opponent and cannot believe his ears. Jeff, meanwhile, continues to break fingers and torture his opponent, saying that he can wait as long as he wants. Larry watches what is happening and says that if no one is behind this daredevil, then he probably won't wake up tomorrow. The villain in Glasses calls the main character the devil and a real monster. The manager intervenes in this conflict and for some reason begins to scold Venus, threatening to cut her salary. Jeff turns to the manager and says that he will beat the crap out of him for bullying his student. The manager doesn't understand who he's dealing with, takes a few steps forward, and points his finger to throw a tantrum. Jeff quickly cuts off any attempts at vile screams and delivers a swift slap that knocks out the villain's tooth. This slap also turns out to be so severe that the man flies several meters to the side. A few moments later, the man falls to the ground and is saved only by the fact that the floor turns out to be quite soft. A man overcome with anger looks at his hands and realizes that his nose is bleeding. Meanwhile, the client, who has gone too far, begs Jeff for mercy, admitting that he is guilty. Jeff says that the first one is ready, then turns his gaze to the bald bandit and asks if he would like to add anything. The bandit asks Jeff if he knows what happened to the man who dared to talk to him like that. Immediately after this, he orders his henchmen to deal with him, but not to kill him, to wait for the boss. Venus feels an incredible horror rising in her heart and understands that there is no way out of here. Jeff continues to calmly hold his opponent's fingers in his hands as he is surrounded by thugs. The scoundrel still looks at his fingers and feels an indescribable pain, because of which he can hardly move. Jeff waits for one of the thugs to approach him and then drops the already crippled victim on him. They immediately attack him from behind, trying to catch him off guard. Jeff adds that these opponents are too insignificant to pose any threat. He quickly dusts off his hands, while the club's patrons look at him in surprise, not understanding what to do next. The bald bandit says that Mr. Hank's men have already arrived at the club, which means that Jeff is finished. After some time, bandits actually enter the club and immediately begin pushing aside everyone who is nearby. One of the bandits recognizes Hank's right hand and greets him joyfully. People watching what has happened understand that this is one of Mr. Hank's main bodyguards. Larry says with a grin that now this daredevil is finished and he will beg for mercy. Alan steps forward to get closer to Jeff, pulling his colleague aside in the process. Finding himself just a few steps away from Jeff, he slowly takes off his glasses and looks him intently with his gaze. Venus hides behind the teacher's back, realizing that Alan himself is standing in front of them. However, to everyone's surprise, Alan bows low and greets his teacher with due respect. The rest of the bandits do the same, causing surprise among everyone who didn't yet know who Jeff was. Larry says that this all sounds like complete nonsense, and Citron covers her mouth in surprise. Jeff looks at his opponents with a cocky expression and asks if they want to get into trouble again. Alan immediately tries to smooth things over by saying that they came here for a completely different reason. He also reports that their boss, unfortunately, is currently in another city and asks to invite Jeff to the meeting. Jeff replies that everything is clear to him now and reflects on how this offer sounds quite profitable. The bald bandit approaches Alan and anxiously asks what is going on here and what it all means. Alan looks around and asks his friend with a grin if he really ran into their teacher. The bandit quickly realizes that the situation is getting out of control and he is in serious trouble. He tries to apologize to Alan, saying that there was probably some misunderstanding. Alan slaps his colleague across the face and tells him that he must apologize to Jeff immediately. The bald bandit bows down before the main character and apologizes, remorsefully saying that he did not know who was in front of him. Immediately after this, he begins to slap himself in order to somehow make amends for his guilt. Jeff says it would be better if he apologized to his student and brings Venus forward. Venus replies that there is no need for this because she really does not hold a grudge against him. Alan asks Jeff what should be done to this man to teach him a proper lesson. Jeff glances at the poor man, who clearly deserved all the problems that were thrown at him. However, he decides not to interfere in this matter and says that he has had enough for today. Alan is a little afraid of his teacher's possible anger and says that he understands everything and will not bother him anymore. Immediately after this, Jeff turns around and says that he will definitely come to the meeting, but only after his work. People nearby are amazed to see how even someone like Alan respects Jeff and realize that this guy really does have a lot of influence. The action moves to the street, where the evening fog is already beginning to descend. Jeff walks next to his student and says that now he expects an explanation from her. Venus admits that her father's company went bankrupt and she decided to look for a part-time job. Jeff nods understandingly and says that she really needs to look for a job, but it would still be better if it were in a more respectable place, since she is still too young. Venus asks her teacher to stop grumbling and declares that she will never return there again. She also says that her teacher is simply Superman, since he was able to put all her offenders in their place. In a matter of moments, Jeff replies that he was raised on the street, and he has dealt with such scoundrels before, and knows how to talk to them. Venus says that it all sounds like a fairy tale, and she is sure that he just made it all up. Jeff takes out his phone, looks at the screen, and says that it's already midnight, offering to walk her home so that she doesn't run into any more trouble. Venus says that Jeff is her idol, and she dreams of being like him someday. Jeff walks her to the right place, telling her that she needs to go alone from here and remember that studying is a priority. Suddenly, Venus turns to Jeff and asks if he knows a girl named Yana. Jeff is surprised and asks why she suddenly remembered this girl. Diving into his memories, Yana was Jeff's ex-girlfriend, but they broke up in their third year. Venus says that she always dreamed of becoming as famous as this girl. She also adds that she has heard rumors that Yana is very arrogant, and this is not at all a quality that she would like to adopt. Jeff recalls how Jana once dumped him, saying that she didn't want to waste her time on simpletons. After some time, he looks closely at his student and notices that something is wrong with her. He sees that a strange aura has appeared around her, and its hue seems frighteningly dark. Venus notices her teacher's surprised look and asks him if something has happened. Jeff reminds his student that she told him about how she has been having a really hard time. Lately, Venus says that today she mixed up toothpaste with cream and smeared it on her face, and also several other such minor mishaps happened to her. Jeff says that Venus is very kind, and that is why she should not do evil, because it does not suit her at all. Venus chuckles and says that some even call Jeff a harbinger of misfortune and bad feelings. Jeff looks closely at his student and says that the dark aura could put her in serious danger. He asks her if there have been any changes in her life lately, other than the problems with her father. Venus says that this year was not the best for her family, given everything that happened and was happening around them. Jeff listens attentively to her story, then reaches into his pocket to take out a small, but very important medallion. He hands over this medallion with jasper, which according to the temple itself, is able to protect her from all kinds of misfortunes and troubles. Jeff also reflects that from now on, no one will dare to offend either his family members or his students, because now they have this amulet. The next day, he arrives at school and finds several men standing nearby, trying to get to someone among the students or teachers. One of the guards turns towards Jeff and says that these people are looking for him, which immediately raises alarm. Jeff looks closely at these people and understands that they are just a bunch of punks and not serious opponents. With incredible nonchalance, he declares that he has no idea who these colorful people are or why they have gathered here. The guard warns the protagonist that these people are a vicious gang from the neighboring area, and they are not to be trifled with. Jeff turns around and says with a smirk that with faces like that, these people only belong in horror movies, not on the real street. One of the bullies, apparently offended, claims that Jeff is laughing at them and trying to make them look like freaks in front of everyone. The hooligan balloon maker says Jeff recently attacked one of their friends and asked how he was going to pay for his actions. Jeff recalls that he did not see these people in the club, which means that most likely they were sent by Stanley himself, who always knew how to cause trouble. Jeff says that he actually attacked the man and does not regret it at all. The students standing next to Jeff say that they were taught correctly and that this man got what he deserved, which adds to the drama. The Fear Six are surprised that the young man was not scared and did not even try to deny what happened, showing a serious character. One of the purple-haired bullies tries to catch Jeff at his word because he doesn't believe that he is really that brave and fearless. Jeff wonders why he would attack someone at all if he doesn't see the point or benefit in it for himself. The leader of the gang declares that if words of simple persuasion do not help, then it is necessary to move on to more harsh and shock actions. Immediately after this, the bullies unfurl a poster stating that Jeff had sex with a student that night to add fuel to the fire. Jeff looks at these scoundrels in anger and asks what they are up to and what the hell they are doing, clearly not intending to give up so easily. The leader of the bullies says that people should know the truth, and then parents will think twice before sending their children to this school. He shows several photographs of Jeff in the company of Venus to prove his point and sow doubt. He also waves these photographs around, assuring everyone that he has solid evidence. Although the students don't immediately believe all of this, suddenly a girl appears among the students, saying that she thought their teacher was a decent person and clearly doubts the accusations. Jeff looks at her carefully and notices a sly look that immediately reveals her hidden intentions and plans against him. A few minutes later, the protagonist finds himself in the director's office at a meeting where these alarming events are discussed. One senior management member says they do not want teachers who behave immorally and could damage the school's reputation. A starter suggests that before jumping to conclusions, the case should be investigated thoroughly and preferably faster than journalists find out about it. Tiffany and the other employees speak out in Jeff's defense, claiming that he couldn't have done such a thing because he is too decent a person. Stanley intervenes in the conversation and says that no one knows what's going on in Jeff's head, and it's best not to mess with him at all. The study group leader agrees with Stanley, saying that Jeff is indeed a little strange and unpredictable. Tiffany expresses surprise that Stanley could speak so rudely and hopes that now he will have a stronger drink to forget this moment. Stanley watches her go with an irritated look, realizing that now she will have to ask him for forgiveness. Long and hard, he happily thinks that after this incident, damn Jeff, will definitely not want to come to school and cause trouble anymore. Parents passing by join the circus, saying that such people cannot be trusted to teach their children, and that something must be done immediately. Jeff tries to figure out what he needs to do to get out of this situation and maintain his dignity and reputation. Without thinking twice, he runs up to the poster and starts drawing something on it, causing surprise and bewilderment among the crowd. It turns out that he simply corrected the hieroglyphs, explaining that there was a spelling error in the inscription, and this changes the meaning. The indignant girl says that Jeff should not avoid a direct question and demands an explanation as to why he took the student to clubs. The girl thinks that if everything goes smoothly, then in this way, she will win the favor of Stanley, who has always been indulgent towards her. Jeff asks his colleague what this has to do with her at all, recommending that she deal with her own problems first. Having received such an incredible insult, the girl immediately becomes furious and cannot contain her emotions. Shouting out grievances, Jeff leaves, feeling morally superior, and the girl continues to scream into the air, clearly not understanding how she lost this battle. After some time, he enters the classroom, where the students are talking among themselves about what happened last night and how it will affect the school. One of the more feisty girls approaches Venus and asks her what she was doing at the club yesterday. Try to find out the whole truth. Venus says that she was very bored. She decided to go to the club, and then she saw the teacher and went home to avoid problems. Her classmate is surprised that the situation looks much more prosaic than she expected and does not understand why such a fuss is being made. Jeff throws the chalk towards the table and says that if the students cannot overcome their curiosity, they will write an essay on a given topic. He also says that the essay topic will be about how rumors affect our lives and why it is important not to believe everything that is said. The class begins to mutter in discontent, but the teacher's determination can no longer be stopped, and he insists on his own. Jeff then heads to Astart's office, where she places a petition on the table against him, demanding his dismissal. Astarta says that a lot of signatures have been collected against him. People are demanding his dismissal and want to know what he is going to do next. Jeff turns around and says that all this is nonsense and trivialities that will be forgotten tomorrow, asking her not to worry and not to make a mountain out of a molehill. Astarte tries to stop him, but he has no respect for authority and simply walks out of the office. Leaving her confused, Jeff thinks to himself that tomorrow, all this ridiculous nonsense will be forgotten. But now it's time to go to a meeting with Hank, which promises to be important. After some time, the action moves to a very rich establishment where important meetings are taking place, and the atmosphere becomes tense to the limit. The receptionist looks at Jeff and asks him how she can help him. Jeff calmly says that he came here to talk to Hank, and a moment later Alan appears in front of him, who politely greets him and says that he is currently busy receiving guests. The employee of the establishment is surprised that even Alan himself came out here to greet Jeff. After a while, Hank asks him to sit down on the couch and says that their first meeting was not pleasant. Jeff replies that it doesn't matter anymore and asks why they invited him here. Next to him sits an old man named Wei, who asks Hank why he compared him to this wine. Jeff assesses the power of this old man and understands that he is, of course, weak, but he has some potential. Looking around carefully, he asks his colleagues what the matter is and why they invited him here. Hank says that he has been feuding with the swindlers from a Sin Corporation for a long time, and the time has come to put an end to them. Hank states that soon there will be a master's competition here, where each of them will send their own person. Jeff continues his train of thought and says that he wanted to send the most capable craftsman he knows. There, Hank says that he really likes his intelligence, adding that it is also very important in the game. He also adds that Master Wei is already aware of everything and understands the matter perfectly. Jeff and Wei exchanged calm glances, but the Master's face still shows arrogance. Hank suggests that they can talk, adding that either way they'll each get $1 million. Wei says that his power cannot be bought for a measly $1 million, as it is worth much more. Hank immediately raises his hand to calm his comrade and brings some clarity. He states that the $1 million is, of course, the starting amount, and after winning, he will pay 5 times more on top of this $1 million. Hank reflects that if everything goes well, he will become a billionaire, and these 5 million will mean nothing to him. Jeff says that he has never seen such money, and in the kingdom of the gods, He completely forgot about the existence of such a currency. Master Wei reflects that such sums only impress weak ignoramuses. Jeff also realizes that this money could make his life easier, as well as his family's life if he can win. Master Wei asks Hank if the representative of this corporation is the one who struck 101 blows. Hank thinks in his head that this is the man in question and says that even a fighter like Alan can't handle it. Master Wei says that it is all about spiritual strength and praises him for not sending his bodyguard. Hank looks at the master and asks him what this spiritual force is that so often appears in his speeches. The master suddenly turns his gaze to Jeff and asks him if he understands what they're talking about. Jeff talks about how in novels, spiritual power is described as an internal energy that flows through the body. He also says that this energy allows the human body to surpass all its capabilities, and few people manage to comprehend it. Alan is skeptical about whether this is all some kind of cheap fiction. Jeff says that gaining spiritual strength is just the first step, and breaking chairs and other objects is a whole other matter. The master says that Jeff is not so stupid, but would be reckless to think that gaining power is a boss. Jeff allows the view that there are quite a few people standing at the foot of the mountain who think they have already conquered it. Master Wei immediately loses his temper and orders the young man not to be rude to his elders, as he is too far from his level. Alan observes the wrath of this master and discovers a pulsating aura of spiritual energy around him. Hank also realizes that this man is really strong and can destroy several people at once with one blow. Jeff smiles and says that he will scare someone else with childish techniques. He'd better practice for a couple more years. Hank tries to resolve this conflict and asks the protagonist to watch his words and not to throw insults. Master Wei says that if it weren't for Hank, he would have killed him even earlier, but now his patience is at zero. Taking advantage of the element of surprise, he rushes forward to deliver a powerful blow to his opponent. Jeff responds with a simple punch, which nevertheless proves to be very effective. Master Wei feels like he is facing an opponent who is 1,000 times stronger than him. A moment later, he jumps to the side, unable to cope with such incredible inertia. Hank realizes that things are getting tough and tries to calm down the participants in this battle. But it is too late. Master Wei takes out an amulet from his vest to use as a weapon of last resort. He also wonders if the artifact's power will hold up, and then prepares to launch a powerful attack. By clutching this amulet, he calls upon this world, dark forces that envelop his body and poison his essence. Hank realizes that he didn't expect to see anything like this, and he thinks about how he can get out of this situation. Jeff says that it is a pity for the old man, who is not even worthy of being called an artifact, due to her low power. Master Wei calls the protagonist an idiot and rushes forward, forming the amulet into a spirit. Blade Hank screams Jeff's name in fear, hoping that he can at least dodge this all-consuming attack. Jeff, meanwhile, calmly waits for the moment when she finally approaches him, showing no signs of fear just a few moments later. Master Wei is overcome with surprise and says that he simply cannot believe it. Jeff used plain water to neutralize all influence from his artifact. The splashes of water engulf the shadow blade and immediately cause it to begin to disintegrate. A few moments later, the rapid splashes fly past the master's head, only miraculously not killing him. When these splashes hit the small painting behind it, they leave small holes that clearly indicate that this artifact was deadly. The master, perplexed, asks what the hell happened, not believing that he miraculously survived such a powerful attack. It also turns its head very quickly to the side to assess the consequences of such a thing hitting the surface. Looking closer, he realizes that all this time, tea leaves were flying at him and stuck into the tree. Looking at the main character, the master realizes that this man has reached a higher stage of the secret teaching. Hank and Alan watch in amazement as they realize that their teacher is truly capable of much. Jeff approaches the master, saying that he is lost, and then demands the copper plate for himself. Immediately after this, his hands begin to light up with spiritual energy, demonstrating the seriousness of his intentions. This energy also resonates with the copper plate that jumps out of the old man's hand. Within a few moments, the plate ends up right in the protagonist's hands, despite the fact that the old man was holding it tightly. With a demonstrative smile, Jeff looks at his opponent and asks if he is sure. He does not object to such a decision, Wei tries to apologize, saying he doesn't know what came over him, and allows him to take the artifact. Jeff speculates that this plate has been sitting there for about 1,000 years, full of negative energy. He also says that you can use it to defend yourself, and if anything happens, you can turn to him. Wei tries to run away, saying that if there are no more questions for him, then he can go about his business. Hank adds that the master he respected so much simply up and left. After seeing the man's power, he also understands that this man is incredibly strong and that he never underestimated his opponents. Jeff hands Hank a cup, saying that there is no more tea in it, hinting that he would like more. Hank quickly turns to his bodyguard and orders him to pour tea, but stops him after a few moments. In order to gain the main character's favor as much as possible, he decides to take out the teapot and pour tea into the mug himself. Jeff tells Hank that from now on, he will be taking money from him and doing the work himself, also stating that it would have been better if they had come to this agreement. Back then, Hank shakes his head and says the teacher. Jeff is a big joker if he really suggests something like that. Jeff says he accepts his offer, but he won't be free until next weekend. He is thinking about visiting Venus's family this week, as things are not going very smoothly for them at the moment. Hank says that Jeff can take his time, and that it will even be better for both of them. Jeff points out that he is a teacher, not a mafia boss, so he shouldn't be treated with such suspicion. Hank says he listens to his teacher and performs a classic warrior salute. Jeff becomes more serious and says that he has one very important request that he would like to make now. Hank also seriously says that he will do absolutely everything in his power. Jeff states that he needs to find one person he has been looking for a very long time. Hank grins and says that he has no equal in such matters. He can easily get information about anyone. Jeff says that more than anything in the world, he would like to find his mother, which surprises everyone present. He says that his mother disappeared when he was little, and they haven't heard from her since. Jeff shares that in his past life, he was able to enter the kingdom of the gods, and being obsessed with spiritual practices, he forgot all of his childhood and youth. Now he is determined to find his mother and bring her back to a safe world so that he can never lose her again. Hank asks his teacher not to worry and says that if anything happens, they will contact their relatives in the province. Jeff, putting his cup of tea on the table, shows his dissatisfaction with this information. He asks Hank if he's talking about the very same relatives he hates so much. Hank looks at his teacher tensely and asks if they really have such a difficult relationship with them. Jeff reveals that his grandfather is Henry Hatch, and that things would be different now if he had supported his parents' marriage. Hank is horrified and says he couldn't imagine Jeff being the heir to such a legend. Another comrade is surprised to realize that in front of them stands the grandson of a real legend of this world. Jeff muses that these people will find out anyway, so it would be better if he tells everything that needs to be told. Right now, over the next few dozen minutes, the protagonist told those present everything they knew about his parents and relatives. Hank indignantly says that it is already the 21st century, and people still cannot get rid of arrogance. Hank also states that he is ready to sever all ties with his relatives at the first request from Jeff. Jeff says it would be reckless to involve business in this, thinking that Hank is only human. Hank says Jeff's family doesn't know what they've lost, while he has a great future ahead of him. Jeff tries to calm his biggest fan and says that he already knows this very well. After that, he says that there is something else he would like to discuss. Tip the I's and cross the T's. After a short pause, he asks his comrade if he has heard anything about the Ferocious Six. Hank replies that he has never heard of such names and assumes that they are some local punks. One of the bandits says that he knows these people because they operate in the area under his control. Jeff says that there is no need to beat these people, as they were probably just bribed, and it will be enough to just talk to them. Hank asks his friend to deal with this issue as quickly as possible, so as not to cause Jeff unnecessary problems. Hank's assistant says he has the power to put these people in their place. Jeff gets to his feet and says that if they are finished, then he should get out of here. After a while, he catches Hank's very attentive gaze and stops to find out what's going on. Hank tells him about the financial aspect of the issue, but suddenly Jeff notices purple auras near him, looking even more closely and pausing briefly. He congratulates Hank on his great happiness. Hank looks at his interlocutor in surprise and asks what he means. Jeff explains that he has a purple aura around, which means he can expect an addition to the family. Hank says he and his wife are no longer young, and doctors said the situation was hopeless, but now he is in better spirits. Jeff adds that Hank should stop killing as soon as he has child, because it will have a very bad effect on his fate. Jeff walks out the door, reflecting on how in the realm of the gods he was taught to read human destiny. He also thinks that Hank is more likely to be lying than it actually is based on his actions. But at the same time, he realizes that he did everything he could. Before he goes out, he hears a familiar voice stopping him and asking for his attention. Jeff turns around and sees his old friend named Lay standing in front of him. They approach each other and embrace sincerely to express their friendly sympathy. Jeff remembers that the man was his friend in high school, and he didn't expect to meet him here. Jeff asks him what he's doing here, and is told that Lay works here in HR. A few moments later, someone calls out to Lay, and they both turn their heads to see who it is. It turns out to be a pretty girl named Shina, who is Lay's sister. Jeff greets her, shakes her hand, and says he is very glad to see her. Shina begins to scold Lay, saying that he is very kind, but has already managed to insult his superiors at work. Lay asks her sister not to bring up the topic, since she and Jeff haven't seen each other for a long time. Sienna reminds him that they are at work, not at a kindergarten, and so he should think about what he says. Jeff watches this quarrel with interest and asks what happened here and what is causing such a noise. Tiana explains that the boss hired a girl who broke the rules, and Lay scolded her. She says it had consequences, and eventually Lay was simply fired. Lay's sister adds that her husband, the financial director, will be arriving soon and will be able to pacify the management. Jeff wonders if this company belongs to one of the very influential families. Tiana turns her head to the side and notices a silhouette belonging to her dear husband. He approaches Lay and asks why he is behaving so badly, warning that if this situation comes to light, it will be very bad. Lay replies that he doesn't understand what the problem is, because he did the right thing from a moral and ethical point of view. Jeff asks his friend why he didn't tell them about his problems, because he would have definitely helped Lay. Explains that Jeff is unlikely to be able to help, since we were talking about the CEO of the main office. Jeff puts his hand on his friend's shoulder and tells him that he did the right thing, and that it was worth it. Sienna's husband speaks disdainfully of Jeff, saying that today's youth do not know how to behave at all. He adds that even in his presence, Jeff denigrates the director's reputation and asks who he thinks he is. Shiana tries to calm her husband down, saying that this young man simply doesn't know anything and just talks whatever he wants. The husband snorts in irritation and leaves, adjusting his glasses. A few moments later, the man they've been talking about for so long entered the room. Causing surprise, it's director's son, who is looking around the room with a frown and moving around the establishment. Tiana's husband approaches the director and greets him, extending his hand to shake. The disgruntled director quickly pulls his hand back, showing the man his place in the hierarchy. He states that this boy has disgraced and humiliated him, as if he were his boss, so the decision remains unchanged. He also adds that it was just a test that Lay failed. Sienna asks her brother to come forward and apologize, to show his loyalty. Lay feels like he has to compromise his moral compass, but he understands that sometimes this is what you have to do to survive. He comes forward, apologizes, admits his mistake, and asks to give him another chance. Jeff sadly reflects that his best friend is innocent, but is forced to constantly humiliate himself in front of these fat people. He understands that all these corporate standards are created by weaklings who, for some reason, adhere to them to get the director's attention. Jeff snorts in annoyance, causing the director to turn in his direction, looking the director in the eye. He says that he has not seen such a vile liar for a long time, and adds that harassment is never a test. The angry director asks who he is anyway, trying to find out who this impudent young man is. Sienna's husband confronts Jeff about who he thinks he is, and demands that he quickly apologize to the principal. Jeff replies that the director must first admit the truth, and if it turns out he is wrong, he will admit it. Sienna's husband understands that he won't be able to win in a verbal confrontation, and an incredible anger begins to creep in. Lay watches his friend with a smile and realizes that he hasn't changed at all during their separation. Tiana continues to try to ingratiate herself with the principal, saying that Jeff is just young and stupid and shouldn't be paid attention to. Lay also begins to protest and ask his sister not to humiliate herself because he doesn't need this job. Sienna's husband is furious and calls Lay a scumbag and asks what he's even talking about. Then he goes to the director and says that he doesn't understand what's going on at all. The director, angry, says that he has heard enough and it is time to take extreme measures. After a while, the elevator arrives here, and all participants in this heated conversation hear a corresponding notification. A few moments later, the doors open and Hank's right-hand man walks in, wondering what's going on here. Director Song says that he fired one subordinate, and his entire family put on some kind of circus. The angry crime boss is simply furious because someone dared to stage such demonstrations. Jeff steps forward and says that he is the culprit of what happened, calmly looking at his interlocutor. Sienna and her husband look at him in surprise and understand that this is definitely the end for this boy. The director also talks about how angry he is that this boy dares to talk to such a respected person. However, as soon as Hank's right-hand man realizes who is standing in front of him, he immediately begins to look scared. Jeff continues to look calmly at his interlocutor, realizing that he has absolutely nothing to fear. Moments later, the man expresses surprise that Jeff is still there, stating that he can take him home. It is worth noting separately the degree of surprise that appeared on the faces of the participants. In this conflict, even Lei, who is already used to his friend often doing strange things, looks stunned. Son asks who this bastard is, if such high-ranking officials are crucifying themselves before him. Immediately after this, he realizes that he needs to bow and apologizes, saying that he did not want to cause a scandal. The crime boss immediately turns to the director and asks if he really offended Jeff. Sun states that he did not know the man was their guest and did not want to touch him under any circumstances. Jeff approaches Lei and demands that he explain the entire situation so that an independent investigation can be conducted. Thus, the main character's friend made the director shake with fear while telling the story. Having heard everything necessary, the crime boss frowns and says that he understands that such behavior is simply unacceptable. A few moments later, he delivers a powerful blow to his interlocutor's face to bring him to his senses, and immediately after that, he turns to Jeff saying that he acted fairly, so there is no need to worry. He also orders Sun to handle the financial matter and collect this month's salary. The director tries to object, but the powerful gaze of the crime boss immediately reminds him who is in charge here. Immediately after this, he wipes away his tears, turns around, and runs away from here so as not to attract unnecessary attention. Jeff hands his friend a business card and says that he now has a new number and they can hang out in a few days. His friend immediately says that apparently his friend has become very successful since he knows such influential people. Jeff reflects that fortunately no misunderstandings arose between them. He also turns to his friend's sister and says that the problem needs to be solved in due time. He also notes that the man next to her is far from ideal and a breakup would be beneficial. After some time, the action moves to an ancient residence where several masters are talking to each other. Master Wei's mentor Chester says he has never seen anyone harmed by ordinary means. Wei says that this man is incredibly strong and has reached simply unprecedented heights. Chester says that if such a young man has aspirations, and in a few years everything will change, and he would like to meet him personally. He also advises Wei to be much more polite the next time he meets this man. After a while, night falls over the city and everyone goes home. Hank comes into his house and changes into house slippers so that he can walk comfortably on the floor. Seeing this sumptuous dinner, he asks his wife why she decided to prepare so many dishes. The wife says that there will be no quarrels today, and she has very good news for them. Hank remembers Jeff telling him that. He was congratulating him on the fact that he was about to have a new addition. Hank takes a few steps forward and asks his wife in surprise if she is pregnant. His wife says he is so sensitive today and figured it out on the first try, even though she wanted to make it a surprise. Hank is shocked to realize that his teacher can actually predict the future. And as a demigod, the crime boss's wife asks him why he is frozen and recommends that he sit down to have dinner. After some time, Hank remembers the main character's words about changing his lifestyle after the birth of a child, carefully recruiting his comrades. He says that it is necessary to immediately prepare all the documents for donating money for the construction of the school. He is asked whether it is really necessary to do this so urgently, but he loudly replies that he will not tolerate delays. Immediately after this, he realizes that Jeff is indeed a holy man to do business with. Meanwhile, the action moves to another area where a new life is now beginning. The 6 hooligans hold a meeting with their employer to discuss their next steps. Stanley looks at them and realizes that they're stupid guys who immediately spend all their money on snack bars. After this, he puts down the glass to communicate with them with feigned politeness and give new instructions. He also says that he is grateful for the help because after the internal newspaper came out, there will never be another person like Jeff at the school again. The leader of the criminal boys says that it was very easy and they don't have any problems because of him. A few moments later, his phone starts ringing loudly, and he is distracted for a while. He asks his interlocutor over the loudspeaker, who dares to call him so loudly at such an hour. After a while, he looks closely at the messages that were passed on to him, and his jaw drops, placing his hand on his employer's shoulder. He says that he needs a secret meeting in order to have an important conversation. The thing is that he received a call from Hank's chief assistant, who is in charge of this area and keeps everything under control. The crime boss is not happy and asks his gang if anyone knows who they are really dealing with. The bandit, slightly confused, says that he does not understand what his boss is talking about and tries to beg for an explanation. Hank's assistant explains that he was at the high school today and was slandering Jeff's teacher. Causing trouble, the bandit says that there is no problem with this because he made preliminary inquiries and found out that this man is actually nobody. The crime boss says that even Mr. Hank himself doesn't dare raise his voice at him. He asks his subordinate if he has completely lost his fear, and the bully feels goosebumps run across his skin. He understands that if he crosses the path of such influential people, then it is all over for him, and his life will be tragically cut short. In order to somehow get out of this mess, he says that something needs to be done urgently to get out of this mess. The crime boss says that no amount of money will help here. They must go to the school themselves and sort the situation out. After some time, the gang of hooligans returns back, while Stanley continues his celebrations and is unaware of what is happening. Looking at his employer, he irritably realizes that because of him, he is now in big trouble after a short pause. He irritably tells his comrades that it is time to get up and leave here immediately. Stanley asks his friend why he is so nervous and suggests having a couple more drinks to calm down. The bandit manufacturer replies that he has already done his job and will no longer dance to someone else's tune. Stanley looks at these hooligans with irritation and thinks about how he will make them pay for this. After a while, the owner of the establishment comes up to him and says that his bill was 860 yen. Stanley reaches into his inside pocket and says he'll get some cash right now to pay for the order. However, after a few seconds, he discovers that he has no money in any of his pockets. When he accesses his digital bank, he realizes with horror that all the money he had there has been stolen. He tries to control the situation peacefully and says that very soon his friends will transfer money to the establishment's account. The restaurant owner says he won't tolerate freeloaders who try to cheat him and leave empty-handed. Stanley still tries to solve the problem peacefully, but he fails. The situation escalates. The next morning comes, and a new day prepares new adventures for our brave hero. A gang of villains comes to the school gates and demands to call teacher Jeff, the security guard, and everyone else. Jeff sneaks up behind them, taking advantage of the fact that there is a crowd of fashionistas standing there and they won't notice him. One of the bullies suddenly discovers Jeff and declares that they have finally found who they were looking for. They immediately surround him and say that they came here to apologize for their behavior and to improve the security guard, happily adjusting his cap, says that these scoundrels came to apologize for the banner they hung earlier. Jeff looks at them in surprise and wonders what kind of show they decided to put on this time. He asks if they've already decided to stage a play called The Storm, which is very popular in the city. The leader of the hooligans replies that they did this on orders from Stanley, who paid them for this dirty work. He also says that he later realized that teacher Jeff was a selfless and kind soul, so they decided to tell the whole truth. Immediately after this, they simultaneously apologize to him and make small bows in his direction. People behind the main character's back understand that they have been fooled and misled all this time. The atmosphere at work becomes far from rosy. After everyone finds out what Stanley did, Scoundrel reflects on the fact that these scoundrels took money from him and then betrayed him despite the payment. Immediately after this, Jeff comes into the teacher's room, wishing everyone a good morning and announcing that today will be a sunny day. Tiffany immediately offers him some tea adding that she has always been confident in his innocence. And supports him, another teacher says that Jeff most likely just bribed the gang to frame teacher Stanley. Stanley desperately clings to the last bits of a lie and claims that it was Jeff who pulled this whole thing off. Jeff asks his opponent to be quiet. Otherwise, he will bite someone and infect them with rabies. A joke, but it sounds threatening. Stanley looks angrily at Jeff and declares that he will definitely pay him back for this meanness. The head of the study group asks them to stop making noise, reminding them that they are in the teacher's room, where order must be maintained. Jeff thanks Tiffany for the tea and says that it is very aromatic and tasty, as if warmed by the soul Tiffany. In turn states that she is very glad that he liked the drink that she prepared for him. With love, Jeff enjoys his tea and then loudly places the glass on the table to get everyone's attention. After this, he declares that he will go and lead his beloved students away from the local dogs to keep them out of trouble. After some time, he comes to class and says that he is very impressed by the behavior of his students, which turn out to be quite unusual. While he is checking the test results, he is informed that some of them even scored 70 points, but there are few of them, and with such results, they will not succeed. The class monitor says that the topic was very difficult and asks the teacher to write the essay himself because it is difficult for all of them to cope. Jeff yells at a student and demands that he shut up while making fun of his stupid metaphors in his essay. The other students, hearing the ridiculous comparisons, start laughing, publicly shaming the poor guy, and the atmosphere in the class becomes tense. Venus also laughs at what is happening, realizing that some of the students seem to think too highly of themselves. Jeff notes that this time around, a few students did score impressively, but most still showed weak grades. Turning back, he says that there is no point in scolding them anyway. But today will not pass without a surprise that will surprise everyone. Immediately after this, he brings the chalk to the blackboard, but it immediately breaks with a characteristic sound. Jeff looks at what is happening with irritation and tries to understand why this crayon suddenly broke. Turning quickly, he asks them what day it is today, in order to receive a lightning-fast answer. One of the students says that today is September 8th, and this date turns out to be very important in the life of the main character. He remembers that on this day in the past, someone jumped off a building, and it was a student whom he now has to save. He glances out the window and spots a small silhouette on the roof, realizing he needs to act quickly. He also tells himself that he needs to act wisely, so as not to ruin the future. Turning around, he realizes that he has always resisted more than the heavens, and they will not go against the call of his heart. Finally, he tells his class that they must review the materials. While he is gone, as soon as he steps out into the corridor, he meets a starty who asks him why he abandoned the students. In the middle of the lesson, Jeff doesn't want to give a detailed explanation and says that he urgently needs to go to the toilet. Astarte tells the students to review the material, adding that she will bring the teacher back right now. Jeff, meanwhile, rushes forward to reach the roof, where something terrible is happening. The girl sitting on the roof wonders if it is worth making such sacrifices and why she should marry someone she does not love. After some time, the girl makes the most important decision in her life and carefully goes down as she reaches the edge of the roof. She decides to end it all now, so that she doesn't have to suffer in the future. Jeff catches up with her and asks what the hell she's doing here. The girl looks at him with fear and asks who he is, after which she forbids him to come near her. Jeff says that he is a teacher, while mentally noting the beauty of this girl. The girl smiles and says that she has never seen such a young and handsome teacher. She also asks to remember her name, adding that her name is Lola, and everyone can see that she is about to jump down. Jeff tries to stop the girl, saying that if she jumps off the roof, her brains will be smeared on the asphalt and she will lose her beauty. Lola says that the body is just a shell, and after death, everything turns into emptiness. Regardless of beauty, immediately after this, she approaches the very edge of the roof and prepares to throw herself down. Jeff realizes that this is a 15-story building, and if he rushes after her, he himself will not survive. In order to find urgent possible options, he decides to turn to the divine sight skill. Taking a closer look, he realizes that this girl has the blood of phoenixes and all sorts of people listed as belonging to the imperial family. He resorts to diplomacy in response to this decision and says that her family must have suffered a misfortune that has caused her to lose her peace. Lola turns around in surprise and asks him how he knows this and why he speaks so confidently about such things. Jeff says he sees people's destinies, adding that she comes from a wealthy family, but has been plagued by bad luck lately. Lola is surprised that no one at school knows her family status, or even how rich they are. She realizes that she has met provincials before, but none of them spoke with such precision and confidence. Jeff says she may not believe him, but if nothing changes today, she should jump tomorrow as Stardy catches up with the teacher and asks him what he is doing here, reminding him that he has no conscience. Astarte says that no teacher should tell a student to jump because it distracts her from committing suicide. Lola tries to calm the director down by saying that she is not going to jump and that she doesn't have to worry. Astarte realizes that the poor child is completely confused and begins to accuse Jeff of his incompetence. She immediately says that he is fully responsible for this student's problems and demonstrates his awareness of the problem. Astarte does not have time to respond to the main character's objection when she suddenly feels strong gusts of wind. They wonder why such a wind would suddenly blow on such a calm day. These gusts of wind are so strong that the fragile and thin girl, Lola, stumbles, not expecting that she could be moved so easily. She begins to scream loudly from surprise and fear. Astarte covers her mouth with her hand and realizes that she cannot bear this terrible sight that she tried to prevent. Jeff lunges forward to catch the girl and grabs her arm. At the last moment, Lola opens her eyes and sees that somehow her savior managed to catch her in time. She looks at Jeff in surprise for a moment, not understanding why he can hold her with one hand. Jeff, meanwhile, advises her to hold on tight and prepare to be dropped off to safety, taking good aim. He throws her to the side so that she ends up back on the roof. Immediately after this, he himself easily pulls himself up, thanks to his outstanding physical fitness and spiritual strength. Unfortunately, however, he steps on the remaining shoe that Lola dropped. Astarte approaches the protagonist, causing him to lose his balance and fall right on top of her. The next moment, Lola, thrown into the air, falls on the couple, bringing down incredible force on them. Astarte asks her comrades if everything is all right, to which they respond only with silence. Jeff understands and says that the principal just saw him save a student and wonders if she will get credit for her grade. Astarte orders the protagonist to return to class, after which she adds that Lola should go with her to the principal's office. Lola looks at the headmistress and says that she is a very arrogant girl. Jeff realizes that now is not the time for deep philosophizing and asks Lola what she is thinking about. Lola reflects deeply on the fact that she has met many different people in her life, but she has never seen anyone as interesting and mysterious as this man. Jeff returns back to class and begins to reflect on how much he has changed since going to the bathroom. The head girl raises the issue that when Astarte entered the classroom, she was dressed very strangely and asks if she and Jeff were doing something forbidden. Jeff is surprised by such suspicions, but notes that most of the boys in the class approve of such behavior. He starts making excuses, saying that he just saved someone. One of the students intervenes and says that they believe him because he's an honest man. By the way, this actress looks like a rather attractive woman. Jeff says that this has nothing to do with what has happened because they don't know about her unusual character. He is about to say something unnecessary, but at the last moment, he hears approaching footsteps and remains silent. Astarte enters the classroom, and Jeff begins to tell her that the principal is a wonderful woman. Immediately after this, he happily turns around and asks if she really wanted something. Astarte says that Lola wanted to transfer to their class, although she is categorically against it. Astarte also adds that the students told him that if something happens, they should help immediately. Lola immediately turns to Jeff and says that Astarte is gone, and now he can only look at her. Jeff clears his throat and says that since this student has transferred to their class, she needs to be introduced to everyone. Looking around the class, he notices that incredible changes have taken place in a matter of seconds. All the students, including the girls, look at their new classmate with love, not hiding their sympathies. Lola quickly introduces herself by name and says that she is very happy to be in this class. The students loudly welcome their new classmate, and Jeff is left wondering why they weren't as excited to see him. The next morning arrives, and Jeff returns to school to continue his work. Looking at his students, he wonders if they all came to learn and really change. He looks at one of the students and says that he usually sleeps at this time and does not come to class. This student replies that a class leader must set the right example and always be ahead a combative student who often got into fights. So they all loved learning and had a lot of enthusiasm. Jeff looks around, trying to understand the reason for the change, and quite quickly notices a female silhouette. This is Lola, who wishes her teacher good morning, while dressed in a traditional school uniform. All her classmates begin to consider her a goddess and look at her with love, even though she is not friends with them. Jeff scolds her for being late and tells her that she should take her seat, which angers the other students. Instead of apologizing, Lola tells Jeff that since she is his first year, she has special privileges. Jeff starts to get angry at her, after which Lola states that her teacher looks really cute. When he's annoyed, Jeff wonders why a student who is significantly younger has suddenly started flirting with him. After a while, he goes into the teacher's room and asks Tiffany if Stanley came today. Tiffany replies that after that incident, he was transferred back to another school, and now he will not appear here again. However, another person intervenes in the conversation, saying that he went with his students to the capital competitions, and everything went well. This man turns out to be a teacher named Sean, who immediately declares that he is jealous of Jeff because Lola is his student. Tiffany immediately interrupts him, asking him to behave decently in the teacher's lounge and not to swear. Sean arrogantly states that Jeff does not have the intelligence to teach such students. Jeff realizes that this man urgently needs to be taught a lesson and turns to his inner spiritual knowledge. Suddenly, the arrogant teacher falls to his knees and hits them painfully on the hard floor. Jeff looks at his interlocutor in surprise and asks if any student is really worth such actions, after which he rises to his feet. Immediately after this, he turns around and walks away, saying that he does not need this man's help or politeness. Sean looks after the main character with irritation, deciding to take revenge for such humiliation. The next morning arrives, and Jeff goes outside to get some food and recuperate. He buys a small candy bar from a nearby snack bar, so he doesn't have to spend a lot of time on lunch. Jeff reflects on how he was able to achieve an average skill level. Although in the realm of the gods, he could have risen much higher. After a while, he returns to the cafe to pay for the bars and puts the money on the table. He also thinks that he must reach the pinnacle of spiritual practice in the shortest possible time in order to enter the circle of gods. However, as soon as he steps outside, he feels the phone suddenly start ringing. Venus calls him on the phone, says that she will not go to school today, and asks for a meeting. Jeff asks why she is crying and what happened to her, to which the girl replies that she was in an accident. She also claims that the talisman she received from him broke, although she herself was not harmed. Jeff wipes his forehead in relief and says he's glad she's okay, then recommends that she contact her parents immediately. After this, he thinks that he must find out who is bullying his student and is going to go against the Lord of Hell. After some time, he ends up in the country house where Venus lives to conduct his own independent investigation. The butler greets him and says that he was expected since today. Venus's father is receiving important guests. Jeff asks what happened and why things haven't been going so well for this family lately. The butler also reveals that there are 3 mentors present, but Jeff states that he would not mind being present. Venus meets the main character quite quickly and happily says that she was really looking forward to his arrival. The girl's father also thanks him for coming to visit his student. Venus's father also introduces Jeff to 3 celestial masters who possess incredible skills that would impress any discerning observer. Standing next to these people is the son of Venus's father's business partner, named Suzerain, who behaves arrogantly and shows obvious disregard for those around him. Venus immediately tries to shut this person up, saying that she will not allow anyone to insult her idol and will protect him at any cost. Venus's father asks Suzerain to behave decently, since his daughter's class teacher is standing in front of him, and such behavior can only harm the matter. Jeff says that there is no problem with this. If Susan is busy, he will not disturb him and will go about his business without distracting others. Venus doesn't tell Jeff that her father went to great lengths to hire these mentors, but didn't believe in Jeff's own talent, which upsets her greatly. Jeff evaluates the 3 mentors, realizing that one of them actually has some pretty good strength, and this earns him respect. The most powerful of these teachers claims that he looked at the houses and found that all their troubles were connected to one painting. That was the cause of the misfortunes. Venus's father says that the painting was given to him by one of his clients, but he does not believe that it could bring so much misfortune, perceiving it as superstition. Other mentors agree with their colleague, explaining that the painting appears to reflect masculinity, but in reality hides malice and bad intentions. They also claim that a ferocious tiger descending from a mountain, with its eyes fixed on the village in search of food, is the personification of rage and danger. Venus's father turns to the chief master with the hope that he knows at least some way to deal with this problem and protect the family. The heavenly master says that there are two ways to resolve the situation. Either stop doing business or marry his daughter to suzerain, which sounds like an ultimatum. Venus's father looks at suzerain and wonders if there are no other options other than such harsh and unfair conditions. Venus grabs Jeff by the sleeve and asks for his help, saying that she categorically does not want to marry this man and is looking for another way out. Jeff immediately intervenes and says that the headmaster is talking absolute nonsense, and his eyebrows simply rise at such words. The old man, seeing Jeff's arrival, understands that he needs to be dealt with and is not going to give up his place. Just like that, Suzanne asks Jeff who he is to be rude to the master and question his judgment, clearly not wanting to lose face in front of everyone. The headmaster states that their young friend is a teacher and therefore simply does not believe in such things, defending his position with confidence. Jeff looks at his interlocutor carefully and asks if he can make him believe in the power of the masters and their spiritual abilities. The master smiles and says that in that case, he will be happy to demonstrate his skills, confident in his power and experience. Jeff raises his hand and says he would be happy to watch this performance, not hiding his interest in slight challenge. One of the clairvoyants loses his temper and declares that their methods are not some kind of tricks and cannot be laughed at, emphasizing the seriousness of what has happened. Suzerain addresses Venus's father, saying that he respects them very much, and that it was he who gave them the good luck talisman, hinting at the importance of family ties. Looking at Jeff, he adds that a person like him is nobody, and people like him are no good for anything, trying to humiliate their opponent. Venus's father watches the events in amazement, trying to understand the reason for the escalating conflict and its potential consequences for the family. One of the masters calls on everyone to stop arguing because adults should not quarrel in front of children, reminding them of decency. Immediately after this, he adds that Jeff is just a resident. He does not understand their rules, and therefore it is forgivable that he behaves this way. After these words, the master decides to use his skills and lifts one of the amulets into the air. Demonstrating his power, Venus watches the demonstration and is surprised to notice that a strange medallion is hanging in the air, like a living object with a will of its own. The master rises into the air, demonstrating the technique of levitation and proving that his abilities go beyond ordinary understanding. Feeling confident, he asks Jeff if he is happy with what he saw and if he now believes in the power of the masters and their spiritual abilities. The clairvoyants congratulate their senior colleague and say that releasing spiritual energy is a difficult technique to master, but it deserves respect. Venus's father reflects on how this man is the greatest master and compares Jeff to him, calling him a common brawler. The senior master says that the technique just demonstrated is just one of them, and he can show many more impressive techniques. Suzerain also praises the senior master, calling him a worthy man whom he admires with all his heart. Despite business differences, he adds that although their companies are competitors, he has always been kind to them. But today the behavior of Venus's family looks dishonest and unworthy. Venus's father realizes that he is being cornered and reflects that they seem to want more from him than just concessions. The senior foreman says that money has no meaning in this matter, and he has already given all possible options for solving the problem. Venus asks Jeff what he needs to do now, but the protagonist does not lose determination and is ready for any challenges. To get out of this situation, he reaches into his inner pocket to take out an artifact, something important and powerful. Jeff says that the master's power is truly impressive, but he would like the master to take a look at the copper disc. He holds in his hands. The senior master states that this disc has likely absorbed negative energy for years and can now harm its owner if used incorrectly. The clairvoyants look at this object in surprise and understand that for the senior master, such things are something extremely dangerous and worthy of attention. Jeff approaches the painting and asks what will happen if he destroys it with the disc, causing tension in the room. The senior master tries to stop him, saying that it will only increase the negative effects and make the situation even worse, warning about the risks. Jeff notes that the senior master is acting surprisingly suspicious when it comes to this painting, which makes him suspicious. Venus's father yells at the protagonist and asks him to stop insulting the senior master, who has the greatest power and is worthy of respect. Jeff asks his student's father to think about where all this is leading and whose family will ultimately emerge victorious in this complex and dangerous game. The senior master assumes a prayerful posture to bring his spiritual energy into a fighting state, preparing for the decisive clash. He also says that his patience has run out, and now the pathetic boy will see the technique of the heavenly master, which will blow his mind immediately after this. He points his finger at Jeff and orders the demons of the mountains and forests to attack. To destroy the enemy, Jeff asks them defiantly if they really think they can defeat him with such childish tricks, demonstrating confidence and strength. After waiting for the right moment, he decides to use the destruction skill to neutralize all these techniques and push back the enemies. The master is surprised that in one fell swoop, his spell was simply scattered into dust and feels himself being damaged by a powerful blow. Jeff continues his spiritual onslaught and prepares to finally destroy his opponent, leaving him no chance. The senior master realizes that his opponent is much more experienced than he initially thought and begins to sense a serious threat approaching. Taking a step back, he says that Jeff is a follower of a secret teaching that is not given to everyone. Immediately after this, an unknown force throws him to the side, causing him to crash into the walls. After this, they ask the main character for forgiveness and hope that he will spare them, because there is no need to get personal. Jeff is said to have almost died, but the senior master is sure that people are always reborn. The senior master says that the heavenly sages are behind him, and if he is killed, then whoever does, it will condemn himself to eternal torment. He states that it is absolutely wrong to kill this man, but as soon as his death becomes known, a major investigation will begin. Venus also tries to warn her teacher, saying that their plans have failed and that this community is very strong. The heavenly master reflects that judging by everything, the reputation has had enough effect on these people, which means they can leave without any worries. Jeff ignores all warnings and delivers a powerful slap to his opponent, knocking out his teeth. It is said of Jeff that if this community were to cross his path, he would level it to the ground in the blink of an eye. Immediately after this, he grabs the heavenly master to somehow teach him a lesson for all his misdeeds. He hits him on the head several times for almost killing his student, her driver, and their entire family. The celestial master says that he made a mistake and promises to correct it, hoping that he will be spared. Jeff looks at this old man and says that he needs to get out of here, and next time he won't get off so easy. He also says that clairvoyants have a vile character, but since they strive for righteousness, they should listen to their hearts. One of the clairvoyants is surprised by the surge of his spiritual energy and realizes that no one had paid attention to him until this moment. Falling to his knees before the protagonist, he thanks him, saying that it is as if he was reborn and will never forget. This man also brings him a punch as a golden VIP card. To somehow thank him, Venus's father ponders for a while that the company's VIP card is very expensive and only a few people have it. Jeff calmly puts the card in his inside pocket and says that he will definitely visit this establishment someday. Suzuran also falls to his knees and begs forgiveness from his new master for behaving so badly. Jeff ignores this and uses his artifacts to destroy this paint. As quickly as possible, Jeff also says that the painting was destroyed, after which Venus's father drives Southern away. Venus catches up with her teacher to hug him and tell him how amazing and interesting he is. Jeff is as amazing to her as any other idol this girl has. Venus kisses the teacher and says that he has a special place in her heart. Sometime later, the action moves to the suburbs of this city, where new plans are being made. The Celestial Master asks to call his colleague named Iroh, who has specific skills after some time. Master Iroh asks his colleague how this could happen to him. Since he is so strong, the Heavenly Master says that he had a squabble with a high school teacher, and that scoundrel must be punished. Iroh knows he won't pass up the opportunity to sell his service to such a high-profile client. There was nothing interesting happening at school today. So Jeff decided to meet his friend after work. Jeff suggested that Lei have lunch at an upscale restaurant, to which someone responded that he would go broke with such expenses. Also, someone says that they will follow Jeff anyway, since he is no longer surprised by anything. After a while, they hear a voice behind them, saying that this restaurant is not suitable for poor people. Taking a closer look, he realizes that the voice belongs to his colleague, who immediately says that just yesterday he was with another person. Jeff's colleague says that his salary is only enough for lunch at a diner, and he has no business here. After a while, a waitress comes up to them and asks if a table has been reserved for them, or not yet. Lei honestly admits that they haven't reserved a table yet. They just came here to have dinner. The worker says that unfortunately, there are no seats available at the moment, and they will have to wait outside for a while. Jeff's colleague laughs at him, saying that they can't even enter such restaurants, let alone eat there. The main character does not doubt his victory for a second, and simply reaches into his pocket to get a VIP pass. Immediately after this, he shows the top access card to the employee, and asks if it is possible to get in using this card. The employee stares at the card in surprise, realizing that it can only mean one thing. Lei also looks at what is happening in shock, and cannot believe that his friend got such a treasure. Immediately after this, she turns to him and says that they're being met by waiters and taken to the best table. After going inside, and after some time, they stumble upon Jeff's colleague along with her boyfriend. Jeff's colleague notices that he was able to pass and is surprised by this fact, not understanding how he managed it. Her new boyfriend tells her not to worry so much about such distracting rubbish. The waitress greets them and says that all the seats in the elite hall are already taken, so they can go to a more modest hall. The rich man says that he has reserved a table in this hall and wonders under what article he should now transfer to another. The waitress says that those two young men have taken their table, so they either change the room or leave here. The angry rich man says that he is the director of the company, and if anything happens, they could be left without work. The waitress becomes defensive and says that if they don't leave the premises, she will call security. An angry man asks the waitress if they're being kicked out because of these two suckers. The waitress replies that these people presented a VIP card of the highest rank, which means they are respected clients of the establishment. The man says that this man is a poor teacher and cannot have that level of access. Suddenly, Larry appears behind him, saying that he didn't expect to meet so many people he knew in one place. The man says that unfortunately, he was kicked out of here after someone showed a VIP card. The rich kids go further to find out who the person was, who showed the VIP card after some time. They discover that this man is none other than Jeff, whom they already remembered. Citron immediately turns to the teacher and demands that she immediately shut up and not utter a single word with her dirty mouth. Larry says that they know this man, and if they were them, they would never get involved with him. Immediately after this, they approach him and apologize for being rude to him last time, as they did not recognize him. A powerful CEO watches this and wonders why these people are being nice to him. The teacher asks him if he would like to have dinner, away from these crazy people, so they can relax. The angry businessman says that they're not right for each other, reflecting on how this woman got him into trouble. The angry teacher says that this man is just an amazing intern, and they're all crazy. The waitress turns to the teacher and tells her that she will either take care of the table or get the hell out of here. The angry teacher reflects on how she had hoped to find a rich man and retire, but now Jeff has ruined everything for her. Iroh passes by this teacher and discovers that she contains a huge amount of hatred. Immediately after this, he realizes that this person is very suitable for his plan and takes out a special piece of paper. Without thinking twice, he attaches this leaf to the body of the angry teacher in order to take control of her. Iroh reflects on the fact that the Celestial Master was attacked by a young man who should have just advanced to a new level. Jeff waves at the CEO, who immediately begins to fawn over him, saying that they will simply forget the incident. Lei asks him who he is since these rich kids are so polite to him. Jeff says that he is just a power intern who fights for his rights, and nothing more. Lei chuckles and says that in that case, he would like to be in his place since he is so highly respected. He also says that Yana would be jealous of him, although in reality, she still has a lot of influence. After a while, Jeff goes outside, thinking that he didn't think he could fit so much in it, and decides to take a walk. After some time, He sees a girl next to him who seems painfully familiar to him. Taking a closer look, he recognizes her as his colleague, a doctor whose aura begins to grow rapidly. Jeff turns away from her attack, only to find that several more people with similar auras have appeared behind him looking at this teacher. They say that she has a nice figure, and they can have a great time with each other. Jeff realizes that these people's minds are under someone's control, and that this someone is nearby. Jeff's colleague starts to undress and says that today he will finally lose everything he has ever had. Approaching these people, she says that they will have a lot of fun, since they can do whatever they want. Immediately after this, she says that she will say that Jeff is to blame for all of this, naively, believing that this is how everything works in the modern world. Men under control say that today she will simply be a pleasure. Jeff wonders who is controlling these unfortunate people and realizes that he needs to prevent this outrage. And when Jeff looks around, he tries to find the person who is responsible for all this, realizing that he cannot be far away. Suddenly another person joins in and wonders what is going on. Jeff takes a closer look at the man and realizes that he is Howard's son, who is the chief of police, Enro, who has been watching the whole thing from afar, realizes that his plan is beginning to crumble before his eyes. He understands that if he makes even one mistake, no one will be able to return to the general staff. Immediately after this, he sends a command to his puppets to enter combat mode and finish off these people. The brave man says that he will detain them and asks Jeff to run to the police. A few moments later, he engages these scoundrels and lands several very successful blows. A few moments pass, and he feels as if he has hit a rock, despite the fact that there is clearly a person in front of him. The puppets under Master Iroh's control begin to shout curses, saying that their victims can expect a terrible death. Jeff smiles and says that he finds it very hard to believe such a thing. The police chief says he doesn't understand the cheerful tone in Jeff's voice when they are facing death. Jeff talks about how older kids should stand up for younger kids, so he doesn't worry about it. Immediately after this, he calls his opponents worthless bastards, who must show their true colors. After a few moments, the puppets freeze in place, and foam begins to flow profusely from their mouths. Iroh appears from the shadows, saying that his opponent is quite young, but already so talented, looking menacingly at his opponent. He asks him if no one ever told him that he shouldn't flood the company of heavenly masters. Jeff discovers that the same fate has befallen his partner, who is now also foaming at the mouth. Jeff steps forward and says that he is becoming curious as to whether the society of heavenly masters really has unlimited power. Iroh is surprised by such knowledge from his opponent and tries to understand who he really is. Iroh also says that he didn't expect such arrogance from the insignificant guy. He will be forcing Jeff, says that unlike his opponent, he is not against murder and is going to finish him off. Immediately after this, he uses his secret technique and says that the opponents will beg for mercy. Iroh realizes that he is up against a very inexperienced master who is pretending to be a simple boy. In order to oppose this man with something, he decides to run through the element of fire, which has never failed him before. Jeff looks at the fireballs approaching him with satisfaction and makes no attempt to avoid them. Finally, he just holds his hand out in front of him to stop them, as if it were a rubber ball. Immediately after this, he tames the power of fire and reduces it by several dozen times. Iroh looks at his opponent in shock and asks him who he is, noting that it is impossible to have such power at this stage. He also understands that he will not be able to defeat this opponent, and therefore he needs to run away as quickly as possible. Jeff calmly reaches forward and decides to use a fire attack to teach this bastard a lesson. Iroh feels a bolt of fire hit him just below his back and knows he won't get off that easy now. Jeff watches his opponent and understands that no one can escape from it, the ruler of hell, even if they really want to. Looking around, he also decides to help his student, who is at the scene of the crime. Coming closer to him, he gives him a few salutary slaps and asks him to wake up as quickly as possible. Once the man comes to, Jeff says that there is no one here and it is time for him to go home. He also states that the criminal who attacked them is already dead, and the bodies can be found in a vacant lot to the east of the city. In addition, he asks to tell Mr. Howard that he will come soon to check the results of his studies. The police chief is surprised that this young man knows his father and decides to pass this information on to him. After some time, The scene again moves to the headquarters of the Heavenly Forests, where hatred and intrigue are once again seething. The wise men wonder how some insignificant little man can disturb their society. The Heavenly Boy says that we need to drink a glass, so that they don't find a burial place for this boy. Some sages also discover that Master Iroh has finally reached this headquarters. The Heavenly Sage says that since he has come here, it means that their purpose is no longer there, and not a single wet spot will remain of him. Iroh says that his power is not enough to kill the man, as he has once again insulted their society. He also says that he doesn't feel very well, so he has to take his leave and go to the restroom. Suddenly the pain in his body begins to increase sharply, and red cracks spread across his face. Some kind of horrible ritual begins, and Iroh starts screaming and begging for help, for someone to save him. A few moments later, his body explodes into fiery projectiles and disappears from sight. On the ashes that remain of this man's body, symbols are drawn in fire, warning the Heavenly Master. The evil old man understands that this message is addressed specifically to him, which means that now is definitely the end for him. After a while, Howard's father gets home and says that the night was hard, and he is going to bed. He also asks his son if he is familiar with a young man who is very skilled in martial arts. Howard says he was lucky enough to meet this teacher and just join them to talk about it. Howard's father tells him the details of everything that happened last night to keep him informed. The voice states that this must not be reported under any circumstances, and that people from the special department must be avoided. It is also said that their magnanimous master took a job as an ordinary teacher, so as not to arouse suspicion. The police chief says he knows this, and that it would be good if there were more people like him. In the country, meanwhile, Jeff reflects on how Iroh is finally dead, and the master community will begin to act more cautiously. He also understands that he cannot relax and needs to gain even more strength and techniques to fix everything. He understands that those who look down on him in his past life will soon regret it after some time. He goes back to school, thinking about how to improve the performance of his class. He understands that the staff from Enro, one high school, will come here today for an inspection, but in reality, they're going to compete. Suddenly, he is stopped by a young man who says that a series of good fortune awaits him, and that he must beware of the word fate. Jeff says that if he hears one more word from this man, then misfortune is already waiting for him. Some more time passes, and he finds himself in the teacher's room to put his paperwork in order. After some time, he begins to smell very pleasant aromas and wonders what it is. Looking up, he suddenly finds Lola standing in front of him and tells her to knock before entering. Lola says that her teacher closed the laptop so quickly that she already had time to think all sorts of indecent things. Immediately after this, she comes closer to him to cause him even more trouble. She also says that in a short time, she realized that he was completely different from the guys she had dated before. Jeff listens to all these compliments and realizes that now is not the time to somehow get off the top. He asked her what she really wanted to tell him. Lola asks if he still doesn't know, and admits to him that she likes him very much. Jeff realizes that this is a critical point in their relationship that needs to be ended as quickly as possible. Moving away from her, he tells her that he has had enough of her antics, and that she should go back to class. Lola says she is absolutely serious, and that in fairness, he is much older than her. Lola claims that the 8-year difference does not bother her, but Jeff reminds her that he is her teacher. He also says that he already has a lover, and his heart has been taken for a long time. Lola asks if there is really a girl who is more beautiful and smarter than her, adding that it is hard to believe. Jeff reflects on the fact that his true love is now in the realm of the gods, and will not be able to come here. Naive Lola says that Jeff is simply lying, because in reality, she felt as if they were two peas in a pod, and nothing could separate them. Tiffany starts knocking on the teacher's room door, wondering if there's anyone there at all. After a while, she enters the room and meets Lola, who greets her kindly before leaving. Tiffany reciprocates by waving, and says that she is very glad to see her. Jeff continues to watch the events, and sees Lola sending him heart symbols. Tiffany, meanwhile, begins to talk about how Lola is a wonderful student, with incredible beauty and excellent grades. She also asks him if he is free this Friday, because she has been invited to a banquet, and she would like him to go with her. Jeff asks if she means the textile company's banquet, to which she replies that it is. Jeff guesses that this means that the banquet is being hosted by one of his acquaintances. He also says that he would be happy to join the banquet and will pick her up to take her there. After a while, he notes that he practiced until late at night, and now he will have to walk home. Between the streets, he is suddenly surrounded by a group of young criminals who try to seduce a starter. Jeff wonders in his mind what this girl is even doing here, but he knows he doesn't have time to think. Observing what is happening, he roughly